Hello there, and welcome to another video for chess today. Today I want to talk about, or rather start a series, possibly of videos, because there's no way I'm going to be able to get all this in one video, on a very influential chess game to me, and one which basically gave me great interest into the comparison of human and computer play of chess. So this is a very famous game and a very important game in development of chess engines, and it features Kasparov, who was playing black, and Deep Blue playing white, and this was the match from 1997, and in particular game 2. So obviously there's already a lot of videos on YouTube regarding this game, a lot of the controversies around it, but I've already prepped some lines to look at in advance. But yeah, this is a very interesting game, and one thing I realised was there wasn't too much information on the final position, so I've done a little bit of research for myself using Stockfish on that, and that's really what I want to discuss. But as well as that, just go through the moves in general, and just quickly touch on some things which had already been highlighted in some other videos, but I'm going to try and keep those variations a little bit to a minimum again, because there's already a lot of content out there on that. So yeah, again, so Deep Blue playing white, Kasparov playing black. And one thing you notice generally about this game is that really white, or at least I noticed, is that white always seems to have the initiative in this game. There were some interesting opportunities actually throughout the match where Kasparov potentially could have pushed for more of an advantage play, although perhaps a little bit more high risk, requiring a lot of tactical precision. But so let's go through this and just have a look at this game. So it starts off with Deep Blue playing e4, Kasparov playing e5. Now it's already been highlighted that Kasparov likes to play the Sicilian c5 in response to e4. So we see knight f3 attacking the pawn, and then again there's a lot of moves which potentially can be played here. We can play the Philadelphia defense with d6. We play the Russian system, I think it's called, Petrov's defense, I think, with knight to f6, and probably the most solid, which is knight to c6, obviously just defending the pawn here and developing a piece. Again, lot of potential moves from white. So this was the Roy Lopez opening with bishop to b5, basically saying from white, well, I'd be willing to trade this knight off, just basically give up potentially the light square bishop at some point. Otherwise, well, where else is the bishop going to go? Probably to b3. It's probably going to end up on b3. I mean, otherwise you're just moving it back to a square, which we could have initially placed the piece on. So, so we see Kasparov rather playing black, playing a6, bishop to a4, and now knight to f6. So again, all theory. Obviously, we're attacking the pawn. So yeah, this idea of bishop takes, knight, d takes, and then taking this pawn has already been explored in other videos. So I'm not going to cover that too much, but yeah, there's a lot of theory already. If you want to watch the theory, it's on the Roy Lopez opening. Yeah, so knight to f6 obviously attacks the pawn on e4, and yeah, basically the best move here is to castle, which gets the king out of the way of any checks. So after an idea like bishop takes, d takes, queen d4, which would attack the knight and the pawn, the king's no longer be able to check, and the rook is ready to come and defend, place a defender on this pawn. So yeah, bishop to e7, which is book. And now we see rook e1. So now there is the threat of bishop takes knight, which is why there's b5. And then bishop to b3. And now d6. So black is just reinforcing defenders on this e5 pawn. And now this bishop has options, for example, on g4, d7, well, or even e6 actually. So yeah, pretty standard solid position for black. c3. Yeah, so there are other options for, I mean, a solid but more passive way of playing could be, for example, like to play a3 if you want to put the knight on the c3 square instead of moving it around the board over here, which is a common idea in this opening. And now finally black castles. Okay, so h3 was decided by the computer, just stopping bishop to g4, going into rather an annoying pin. h6, which I don't know too much the reasons behind that move. And now d4, which obviously was the general idea for white in this position, is to reinforce this centre of pawns here. So rook e8. So again, the knight's just going to come over here to g3. Bishop to f8. So just moving pieces around. So yeah, Kasparov decided to put the bishop on to d7. So again, this bishop could potentially have gone to b7. Obviously the rook still keeping an eye on this pawn. Knight to g3. So we've got a knight which can potentially infiltrate on f5, which could be generally a good square for the knight. And now we see knight to a5. So obviously, having played c3, the bishop can retreat. And now c5 from Kasparov. So there was a lot of options really now. But we see b3 from deep blue. Kasparov played knight to c6, just kind of anticipating d5, which does obviously block up the position. And then knight to e7. So this knight obviously is destined for different squares, perhaps the f4 square maybe. Bishop to e3, just general development move, logical place to put the bishop. Knight to g6, queen d2, and now knight h7. So, excuse me, just this idea, Kasparov with these pieces kind of cramped, just wants to trade the pieces off. Again, a lot of this has already been covered. So, yeah, a4. So the action really is occurring on the queen side now. Everything else is kind of blocked up. There's not really much else to do. Knight to h4. I think I looked at knight to f4. I don't think this works. Yeah, this doesn't work. And again, he just wants to trade off pieces. So queen takes, queen to e2. And yeah, it looks a bit funny kind of bringing the queen here and then putting it back. Really, the queen doesn't belong anywhere else, I don't think. And I think black just needs to keep reinforced pieces. I mean, obviously white has pressure on the a file. So b4, queen c7. So really black is kind of waiting, it seems, with these moves, not really being too active. And just going to turn the engine on here. Rook e to c1. So yes, in this position, I mean, Kasparov played c4. I think c4 was actually basically the most solid way of playing. I think queen b7, it looks like queen b7 is playable. C4, and now rook to a3. I'm wondering about rook a2 actually. I don't know if that makes a huge difference. I might just quickly throw that in. Rook a2. Well, I suppose in this particular position the rook is fine on a3, so rook c8, rook e c8. So obviously again just reinforcing centralised pressure here. Queen d8. Now yeah, in this position again white's, the key point is the pressure of white's position on the a file. And it's given that queen d8 is the best move, just to reinforce all of that essentially. And then f4, so this is really where, you know, opening up that second front for white. I mean, tactically sound. So yeah, yeah, Kasparov wants to bring his knight back into the game, because obviously the knight was just not very well placed here, and it's kind of like, again, black doesn't really have too many aggressive replies. It seems that basically white's doing everything and black is just responding to threats. So yeah, f takes e5, so again this is the whole point, just generating that pass pawn. So obviously there is this d6 square is now vacant, so obviously this was the idea with the knight as much as anything else, to be able to place it on this square, which is actually quite a good square for the knight, I think. Queen to f1, so we do see knight to e8. Queen to f2, so again these dark squares are, well black still has the dark square bishop, but obviously the queen and bishop got a lot of pressure here. It's kind of annoying, like we've got moves like bishop to b6. It's just, I mean, it's harder for black really to defend these squares, and black can't really challenge this diagonal very easily. I mean, because obviously with this pawn here, how do you get this bishop involved? I mean, at the moment it's just kind of looking over these pawns. So knight to d6, blockading this pawn, but notice it also defends b5, so kind of just added support there, so potentially that could maybe free up a piece for black. And I think this was the point of this next move. I'm not sure if this was. I think this is the game continuation. Well, it's suggesting that white can play. This move was played later in the game, but it's playing rook to a2, and I think the idea is if there was a trade, the knight can take, and then the knight would then be attacking the rook. But again, it does seem somewhat undesirable, because obviously black would have, you know, broken pawn chain here, and the rook's covering it, so I don't know. I mean, it seems like the queen and the bishop could probably pick this pawn up, so I'm not sure about that, but it's what's suggested anyway. But yeah, bishop to b6, kind of just an in-between move really, just harassing the queen. So Kasparov played queen to e8. It seems that I think queen h4, yeah, queen h4 is an option. I think with a similar idea to what Kasparov did in the game, which was to kind of get this bishop involved, just tie these pieces down a little bit. Because obviously at the moment, if the knight moves anywhere, then the queen's hanging, and the queen kind of needs to move somewhere where it, well, obviously the bishop's technically loose piece. The queen needs to ideally move somewhere where it can still defend the knight. So Maybe that was the idea, and obviously again with this knight here defending b5, then the queen, it's not so essential the queen's here. We can, we maintain a pawn on a6, just keep the position blocked up. But again, c4 would be possibly a liability. But yeah, certainly an interesting variation. But Kasparov went for queen to e8. And now we see, again, for the idea before, just playing rook to a2, just maintaining this pressure on the file. And now bishop to e7. It's this idea of bringing the bishop down to h4, maybe. So bishop to c5, just placing that in a pin. And I think this was the position I looked at, is that there is an interesting option here for black, which is to play a5. So what would the continuation for this, the most logical would be takes, c takes, so we challenge, take off the rooks, and obviously this pawn here is hanging at the end, so knight takes. Again, I mean black's still got quite a few pieces, so maybe this pawn is not so, such a critical problem. But obviously we've got two passed pawns now. Black and white both have passed pawn, although black's is not is isolated, so potentially not as good. But yeah, this was just an example of a continuation of how the game could go. Suggests trading off these bishops, and then king h2. I think in a lot of positions this I think king safety does seem to be a significant issue with a lot of the ones that I looked at. And now bishop to h4, so with a similar kind of idea. So this would be an interesting variation that could have potentially been played. So bishop to f8 is what was played. Yeah, bishop to f8, which is, again, it's very it's not really doing anything for black. It's kind of a waiting move, kind of almost a mission of defeat. So, and then just white basically just playing all the attacking moves. So here, f6. Yeah, so we look at this idea about obviously now this bishop's sort of improved. If